Well, we find ourselves today needing a tune-up on this here TW200. Welcome to NSR Projects. Let's get started. Let's jump right into adjusting the valves. As you can see, there's very little clearance to get this valve cover off, so what I did is I grabbed my 5mm Allen and my 1/4 inch wrench. This makes it way easier than trying to get a ratchet in there. Here on the crankcase, we have to remove these two plugs. The crank bolt there is a 17mm. This is the intake valve. Watch it open and close. FYI, this is the one on the back of the engine. Let's make sure it's at top dead center by looking through this peephole. I'm starting on the intake valve side. Here's the specifications for clearance. With my valve adjusting screw now loose, I tighten it down finger tight up against my feeler gauge. I carefully put the lock nut on now, making sure the screw doesn't twist with it. Here's the finishing touches to make sure we're within spec. I like to lift up on the rocker arm, helps get a better reading on the gauge. There is a valve tappet adjusting tool to hold the screw while you're tightening the lock nut, but needle nose pliers work as well. This is the exhaust valve side. I'll pop up on the screen the clearances. I'm sure you notice the exhaust valve has a little bit more clearance. That's just due to the fact that they get hotter. Finger tight down on the feeler gauge, then back her off just a touch, maybe a schoonwinkle. And that about does it for the valve adjustment. It ain't hard on these bikes, just double check your work, make sure you have it right. You can do it yourself, you'll be fine. Well, let's move on to the oil change. Grab your 19mm 6-point. Careful not to round this off. Tap it with a hammer if it sticks. It'll come free. Now if you're sitting there thinking, man, that oil looks pretty thin. Well, you're right, it's got some gas in it. This can happen when your carburetor float sticks and you leave your petcock on, so always turn your petcock off. Here's the smell test. Now my old oil drain plug was trashed. I picked up this new one on Amazon for only 15 bucks. Always lube your O-ring. There was a little bit of debris in this screen, but nothing unexpected. My dad's gonna say, wear gloves, knucklehead. It goes in screen, then spring, then O-ring on your plug, then your plug. Now these don't need to be super tight. Be careful, do not round them off. They are easy to round, so use a 6-point. They torque to 31 foot-pounds. Alright, time to remove the oil filter. The top two screws are JIS Phillips, but your Craftsman number 3 will take them off just fine. The one on the bottom is a 5mm Allen. JIS stands for Japanese Industrial Standard. They have a slightly different profile than a regular Phillips head screw. For the most part, they're interchangeable with each other though. A K&N 143 is the oil filter I use this time. I always like to put fresh oil on the rubbers. This side goes in first, then line up the hole in your oil element cover. There's an O-ring that goes in the bottom hole, and there's also an O-ring on your cover. Make sure they're in good shape. Oil will definitely gush out of these if you don't do it right. Everything goes back on just the way the old one came out, no magic to it. Again, these don't need to be super tight. Don't round them or break them. Towards the bottom here, you can see an oil sight glass with a low and a high mark. These bikes call for a 10W40 motorcycle oil. I'm using the O'Reilly's flavor. If you're like me and too lazy to go find a funnel, just cut a water bottle. You know it's only going to dump everywhere. 1.1 quarts fills it up with a filter. This is my first time trying out this aerosol tan air filter oil. And man, is this stuff sticky. I assume that means it's good stuff. I don't know. You let me know in the comments. If you want to watch me take the old air filter out, it's in my previous video in the series. When I pulled the old one out, it just disintegrated and fell apart everywhere. This cover plate is just held on by 4 Phillips screws. Yes, they are JIS again. Speaking of the previous video, this is part 2 in a series. In part 1, I wake up the bike from its 2-year-long hibernation. Check it out if you'd like. I replaced the battery and the carburetor in that one. I drained the old gas out and give it its first test fire. Now this piece of plastic just snaps right into the fuel tank, and then it has 2 screws that thread directly into the airbox. And that wraps up the air filter replacement. Spark plug replacement couldn't be any easier. Just use your 18mm deep well to take it out. The spark plug it came with from the factory is an NGK D8EA, so that's what I recommend replacing it with. I'll pop up the plug gap on the screen here. It doesn't hurt to put a touch of anti-seize on your threads. And the book says to torque your spark plug to 12 foot-pounds. And that wraps up the spark plug. Now I'm going to do the carburetor's air fuel mixture. Make sure the bike is warmed up before doing this. I'll pop up a video of the carburetor from underneath to show you what I'm doing in just a second. Here's the screw that controls your fuel. A good starting point is to tighten it all the way, then back it off about 3 turns. A lot of these carbs come set pretty lean from the factory. You can fine tune it once it's on the bike from here. Because there's no room for a screwdriver underneath, I'm using a standard 3/16 drill bit. When you have it tuned correctly, you can rev it and drop back to idle pretty quickly and smooth. Now that the tune-up's all done, here's a cold start in freezing temperatures. Starts right up quick. Take a touch of the exhaust and show you it's cold. No YouTube trickery here. Well, that's all for today. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. And if you want, check out this video here.